The last steer collapsed in the dust, tongue swollen and lips cracked. And Xander Ramsey knew that was it, everything he had worked for since he was 18 years old, gone in a summer that refused to rain. He stood there in the middle of what used to be his cattle ranch outside Ordway, Colorado, watching the buzzards circle overhead in the merciless August sky of 1883. The Arkansas River had dwindled to barely a trickle, and his water rights, well, they did not mean much when there was no water to claim. At 27 years old, he had built this place from nothing, but the drought had taken it all back. The bank would come soon enough. They always did. Xander walked back to the ranch house, his boots kicking up dust that used to be good grazing land. His father had died building this dream, crushed under a spooked horse when Xander was barely old enough to shave. His mother had followed 2 years later, her heart just giving out one morning. Now it was just him and the emptiness, and he was not sure which one would win. He was packing what little he could carry when he heard the wagon. Visitors were rare these days. Most folks had already left, chasing rumors of better land further west or giving up entirely and heading back east. He walked out onto the porch, squinting against the sun. The wagon was small but well-maintained, pulled by 2 horses that looked healthier than any animal had a right to be in this scorched landscape. The driver was a woman, and that alone was enough to make him stare. She wore a practical brown dress with a wide-brimmed hat, and when she pulled the wagon to a stop in front of his house, he could see she was young, maybe 23 or 24, with dark hair pulled back and eyes the color of creek water in spring. "You Xander Ramsey?" She called out, her voice clear and strong. "Depends on who is asking," he said, descending the porch steps slowly. His hand rested near his hip out of habit, though he had sold his good revolver 2 months ago to buy feed that had not mattered in the end. "Keira Owens," she said, climbing down from the wagon with an ease that spoke of someone comfortable with hard work. "I have been looking for you." He stopped a few feet from her, confused and wary. "Do not know why. I have got nothing worth finding." She smiled then, and it transformed her face from merely pretty to something that made his chest tight. "That is where you are wrong, Mr. Ramsey. You have got water rights to a spring up in the hills. The Chandler Spring, they call it." Xander felt his jaw clench. "That spring dried up in June." "No," Keira said, pulling a folded paper from her pocket. "It did not. It just shifted underground about 40 yards east. I had a surveyor check it. It is flowing stronger than ever, but it is on my land now." She unfolded the paper, showing him an official-looking document with property boundaries marked in careful ink. "I bought the Morrison place 2 weeks ago." He stared at the map, his mind racing. The Morrison place bordered his property on the north side, up in the rocky hills where springs sometimes bubbled up from the aquifer below. He had not been up there in weeks, too busy watching his cattle die down here in the valley. "So you came here to gloat?" he asked, his voice harder than he intended. "Come to tell me that my last hope is on your land now." Keira folded the paper and met his eyes directly. "I came here to say we can share this. That spring puts out enough water for both our properties if we work together. I need someone who knows this land, who knows cattle and horses. You need water. Seems simple enough to me." Xander laughed, a bitter sound. "Lady, I do not have anything to share. The bank is going to take this place in a month, maybe less. I got $3 to my name and a house full of nothing." "I paid your bank debt this morning," Keira said calmly. $472. I told them you were going to be my business partner and I needed to protect my investment." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "You what?" "I need help, Mr. Ramsey. I have got water and money and land, but I do not know cattle. I do not know how to build the kind of operation that will last out here. My father was a merchant in Denver, and when he died last year, he left me enough to buy something of my own. I want to build a ranch, a real one, but I cannot do it alone. Xander sat down hard on the porch steps. You paid off my debt. You do not even know me. I know you have been here for 9 years. I know you built this place yourself after your father died. I know everyone in Ordway says you are honest and hard-working, even if you are too stubborn to ask for help. She sat down next to him, leaving a respectful distance between them. I know you have not given up, not really, or you would have left already like the others. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw determination in those creek water eyes. Why me? There are other ranchers, men with more experience. The other ranchers are either already gone or too proud to work with a woman, Keira said bluntly. You are the only one with land that connects to mine, and you are the only one who has not tried to cheat me or marry me since I got to town. Give me time, Xander said, and was surprised when she laughed. So is that a yes? Keira asked. Partners? He should say no. It was crazy, partnering with a woman he had just met, letting her pay his debts and tie their futures together. But he looked out at his dead land and thought about the spring in the hills, water flowing strong and cold while everything down here died of thirst. Yes, he said. Partners. They shook hands, her grip firm and dry, and Xander felt something shift in his chest, not quite hope. Not yet, but maybe the memory of what hope felt like. The next morning they rode up into the hills together. Keira sat her horse well, he noticed, comfortable in the saddle in a way that spoke of real experience. She had changed into riding clothes, practical pants, and a shirt that probably scandalized the church ladies in town. I learned to ride when I was 6, she said, catching him watching. My father used to take me with him on buying trips. He said a merchant needed to know the land as well as the ledger. Smart man, Xander said, guiding his horse around a cluster of rocks. He was, Keira agreed, and he heard the grief in her voice. He thought he had more time to teach me everything. Then his heart just stopped one day in the store. He was 49. My mother went the same way, Xander offered. I think it was the land that killed her, really. Too hard, too lonely, but she never said so. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the morning sun not yet hot enough to be brutal. Up here in the hills, there were still patches of scrub grass clinging to life, and he spotted a rabbit darting between Rock's first live animal he had seen in days besides horses. The spring was exactly where Keira's map said it would be, bubbling up from between 2 large boulders in a small clearing. The water was crystal clear, forming a pool about 6 feet across before trickling away downhill. Xander knelt and cupped his hands in it, bringing the cold water to his lips. It tasted like salvation. We need to pipe this down, he said, his mind already working on the problem. Dig a proper irrigation system, maybe a holding tank. If we do it right, we can water enough land to support a couple hundred head of cattle plus horses. Keira knelt beside him, trailing her fingers in the water. How long will that take? 2 months if it is just me, less if we can hire help. I have money for 3 workers, Keira said. Maybe 4 if they do not ask for much. Xander looked at her. You really thought this through? I had to, she said. A woman alone trying to start a ranch, people are already calling me crazy. I need this to work, Mr. Ramsey. It is not just about money. It is about proving I can do this. Xander, he said. If we are partners, you should call me Xander, she smiled. Keira then. They spent the rest of the day surveying the land, mapping out where the pipes would run, where they could dig channels to spread the water most efficiently. Keira had an eye for it, he discovered, seeing possibilities he had not considered. By the time they rode back down to the valley, they had a plan that might actually work. Over the next weeks, they hired 4 men from town laborers who were desperate enough for work that they did not care about working for a woman. They dug trenches in the brutal heat, laid pipe that Keira purchased from a supplier in Pueblo, built wooden channels and gates to direct the water flow. Xander worked alongside them, his back screaming by the end of each day, but it was good pain, honest pain that came from building something instead of watching it die. Keira worked too, ignoring the scandalized looks when she showed up in pants with a shovel over her shoulder. She was not as strong as the men, but she was stubborn and smart, and she never complained. At night, they would sit on Xander's porch, their porch now, he supposed, and go over the account books by lamplight. "We can afford 50 head of cattle next month if the water holds," Keira said one evening, her finger tracing down a column of numbers. "Maybe 75 if we wait until October and get a better price." "October is smarter," Xander agreed. "Gives us time to get the pastures recovering, make sure the water system is solid." A moth battered itself against the lamp glass between them, and Keira brushed a strand of hair from her face. She looked tired, he thought, but happy. It had been a long time since he had seen anyone look happy out here. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She glanced up. "Of course. Why ranching? You had money, you could have done anything. Why come out here to the middle of nowhere and break your back digging ditches?" Keira was quiet for a moment, staring out at the dark land. "My father wanted me to marry a merchant's son in Denver. Nice boy, rich family, everything proper. But I went to his house once for dinner, and I saw what his mother was just a decoration, sitting in her parlor doing nothing while the men talked business. She could not even tell me how much money her husband had or what he did with it. She just smiled and poured tea." She shook her head. "I did not want that. I wanted to build something, to know I could stand on my own. Even if I fail, at least I will fail doing something real." "You are not going to fail," Xander said, and meant it. She looked at him then, and something passed between them in the lamplight, something warm and startling that made him forget what he was going to say next. "We are not going to fail," Keira corrected softly. "Partners, remember." The water reached the valley 2 weeks later. They opened the gate at dawn, and Xander watched as the first trickle turned into a steady flow, running down the channels they had carved, spreading out across the thirsty land. It would take time for the grass to recover, but it would recover. Life was stubborn that way. Keira stood beside him, and without thinking, he took her hand. She did not pull away. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it," he said. "You saved this place." "No," Keira said, squeezing his fingers. "We saved it together." By October, they had purchased 60 head of cattle and a dozen horses. The grass was coming back in patches, and the water flowed steady and sure. Xander taught Keira how to rope a steer, how to tell when a cow was about to calve, how to read the weather in the way the clouds built up over the mountains. She taught him how to keep proper books, how to negotiate with suppliers, how to plan 3 months ahead instead of just 1 day at a time. They worked well together, he realized. Her caution balanced his impulsiveness, his experience balanced her inexperience, and somewhere along the way they had stopped being just partners. He noticed the small things first, how she always made sure he ate when he was too focused on work, how she laughed at his terrible jokes, how his heart jumped every time she smiled at him. He found himself looking for excuses to be near her, to stand close when they were looking at the maps, to let their hands brush when passing tools. It was November when things changed. They were riding the northern boundary, checking the water lines before winter set in, when Keira's horse stepped wrong and stumbled. She came off clean, landing in the dirt with a grunt, and Xander was off his own horse before he even thought about it. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands on her shoulders, checking for injuries. "I am fine," she said, laughing a little breathlessly. "Just embarrassed." But he did not let go, and she did not move away, and suddenly they were very close, her face tilted up toward his, her eyes wide. "Keira," he said, his voice rough. "Yes," she whispered, and he was not even sure what he had been asking, but he kissed her anyway. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, and it felt like the first rain after the drought, like something essential and necessary and right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she was smiling. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," she admitted. "Months," he corrected. "I have wanted to do that for months." "Why did you wait?" she asked. "Scared," he said honestly. "Scared you would say no, scared I would ruin the partnership, scared of wanting something this much again." Keira touched his face, her fingers gentle. "I am scared too, but I am more scared of not trying." He kissed her again, softer this time, and felt something tight in his chest finally loosen. They rode back to the ranch house holding hands, their horses walking close together. That night, sitting on the porch after dinner, Xander asked the question that had been building in him for weeks. "Stay," he said simply. "Not just as a partner, stay with me." Keira turned to look at him, the lamplight catching in her dark hair. "Are you asking me to marry you, Xander Ramsey?" His heart was pounding so hard he thought she must be able to hear it. "Yes. Yes, I am. I know it has not been long, and maybe it is crazy, but I love you, Keira. I think I started loving you the day you showed up with that map and that impossible offer. You saved my life, and now I cannot imagine living it without you." She was quiet for so long he thought he had ruined everything. Then she smiled, and it was like the sun coming up. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you too, you stubborn man. I think I have loved you since you sat down on these steps and decided to trust me even though you had no reason to." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and when they finally pulled apart, they were both grinning like fools. They were married in Ordway 3 weeks later, in the small church with half the town in attendance. The same people who had called Keira crazy for buying a ranch now called her lucky for catching a good man. And the ones who had called Xander foolish for partnering with a woman now said he was smart for marrying money. Neither of them cared what people said. Keira wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, and Xander wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed. When the preacher asked if he would take this woman, Xander said, "I will," with his whole heart, and when Keira said the same, her voice was strong and sure. They honeymooned at the ranch because there was nowhere else they wanted to be. The first night as husband and wife, lying together in the house that was now truly theirs, Keira traced the calluses on his palms. "I used to dream about having soft hands," she said quietly. "Being a lady with soft hands and servants and nothing to do." "And now?" Xander asked. "Now I am glad my hands are rough. They match yours." She laced their fingers together. "This is better than any dream I ever had." He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her against him. "I lost everything to the drought," he said. "And then you appeared with water rights and said we could share this. I thought you were saving the ranch, but you saved me." "We saved each other," Keira whispered. "Partners, partners," he agreed. "Always." Winter came hard that year, but they were ready for it. The cattle were strong and healthy, the water lines protected from freezing, the hay barn full. They spent the long evenings by the fire, making plans for spring, for the years ahead. Keira wanted to expand the horse breeding operation. Xander wanted to build a proper barn. They both wanted children someday when the ranch was more stable. 3, Keira said one snowy evening. "I want 3 children." 4, Xander countered, his arm around her shoulders. "Nice even number," she laughed. "You just want help with the ranch work." "That too," he admitted, grinning. "But mostly I want to see little ones with your eyes running around the place. Want to teach them to ride, to love this land the way we do." Little ones with your stubborn streak, Keira said. That will be interesting. Our stubborn streak, he corrected. You are at least as hard-headed as I am. She could not argue with that. Spring came eventually, the way it always did. The grass grew thick and green with the steady water, and they bought another 50 head of cattle. The ranch, which they had officially named the Ramsey Owens Ranch, ignoring tradition, was starting to really thrive. Other ranchers who had mocked them now came asking for advice, wanting to know how they had made it work when so many others had failed. Xander always told them the same thing: water and stubbornness, and the right partner. By summer, Keira was pregnant. She told him one morning in June, standing in the kitchen with the sun streaming through the windows, her hand on her still flat belly. "We are going to have a baby," she said, and her voice shook just a little. Xander crossed the room in 2 strides and swept her into his arms, careful and reverent. "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "Keira, we are going to have a baby." She was crying and laughing at the same time. "I am terrified. What if I am no good at it? What if something goes wrong?" "You are going to be amazing," he said firmly. "You turned a dead ranch into a thriving one. You can handle a baby." "That is not the same thing at all," she protested, but she was smiling. He placed his hand over hers on her belly, imagining the tiny life growing there. "We will figure it out together, just like we figured out everything else." The pregnancy was not easy. Keira was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep food down. Xander took over more of the ranch work, refusing to let her push herself too hard. They hired another hand to help with the daily operations, a young man named Tom who had just come west from Ohio. As Keira's belly grew, Xander found himself doing things he never thought he would: sewing baby clothes late at night, building a cradle from good oak wood, reading aloud from his mother's old Bible about children being a blessing from the Lord. He had never been particularly religious, but he found himself praying more in those months, asking for his wife and baby to be safe. In February of 1885, on a night when the snow was falling thick and soft, Keira went into labor. The midwife from town came, a practical woman named Mrs. Chen, who had delivered half the babies in Ordway. She shooed Xander out of the bedroom and told him to boil water and stay out of the way. It was the longest night of Xander's life. He paced the kitchen, jumped at every sound from the bedroom, prayed more desperately than he ever had. When he finally heard the thin, angry wail of a newborn baby, he thought his knees might give out from relief. Mrs. Chen emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. "You have a son," she said. "Strong and healthy. Your wife wants to see you." Xander went into the bedroom on shaking legs. Keira lay in the bed, exhausted and pale but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. He sat carefully beside her, looking down at the baby's red, wrinkled face. "Our son," Keira whispered. "Xander, we have a son." "He is perfect," Xander said, his voice breaking. "You are perfect. I love you so much." The baby opened his eyes. They were blue, but Keira said all babies started out blue and seemed to look right at him. Xander felt his heart crack open in a way it never had before. "What should we name him?" Keira asked. They had discussed names for months but never quite decided. Looking at his son now, Xander thought of his father who had died building this dream and his mother who had held it together until she could not anymore. "Thomas," he said, "after my father, Thomas James Ramsey." Keira smiled. "Thomas James, I like it." "Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world." The baby made a small noise that might have been agreement, and they both laughed, giddy with exhaustion and joy. Thomas was a good baby. Mostly he ate well and slept in reasonable stretches, and he rarely cried without cause. Xander discovered a patience he had not known he possessed, walking the floor at 2 in the morning with his son against his shoulder. singing old songs his mother had taught him. Keira nursed and changed and worried in the way of all new mothers, but she took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else. The ranch continued to grow. With the steady water from the spring and smart management, they were able to expand their herd and start breeding quality horses. Other ranchers began to seek out Ramsey Owens stock, knowing it came from healthy animals on well-watered land. By the time Thomas was walking, they were more than solvent, they were prosperous. "I want to hire a proper foreman," Keira said one evening when Thomas was 2. "Someone who can handle the day-to-day so we can focus on the bigger picture. Maybe expand to sheep or think about buying the Stevens place if he really is selling." "Sheep," Xander said thoughtfully. "That is not a bad idea. Diversify the operation." "My merchant father's daughter," Keira said with a smile. "Never put all your money in one venture." They hired a foreman, a grizzled old cowhand named Pete who knew cattle better than most men knew their own wives. With Pete managing the workers, Xander and Keira had more time for Thomas, for each other, for planning the future they were building together. When Thomas was 3, Keira told Xander she was pregnant again. This time she was less scared, more confident. The pregnancy went smoother, and in the spring of 1888 they welcomed a daughter they named Sarah Mee. She had Keira's dark hair and Xander's green eyes, and she owned his heart from the first moment he held her. 2 children, Keira said, exhausted but happy. "That is a good number." 2 is perfect, Xander agreed, though privately he still thought 3 or 4 would be nice. But he would wait and see. They had time. The ranch continued to thrive. They bought the Stevens place when he retired back east, doubling their land. They added sheep to their operation, and then a small orchard, apples and peaches that grew well in the Colorado climate. The Ramsey Owens Ranch became known as one of the best-run operations in the county, proof that smart management and hard work could overcome even the worst drought. Thomas grew into a sturdy boy who loved the horses, spending hours in the stables with his father. Sarah was more interested in the account books, sitting on her mother's lap while Keira worked on the ledgers, asking questions about numbers that made both parents laugh. When Thomas was 7 and Sarah was 4, Keira surprised Xander with the news that she was pregnant again. "I thought we were done," he said, but he was grinning. "Apparently not," Keira said dryly. "Seems we are going for your original number after all." Their 3rd child was another son born in the winter of 1891. They named him Daniel, and he was the spitting image of his father's same green eyes, same stubborn chin, same way of wrinkling his nose when he was concentrating. 3 is definitely our limit," Keira said firmly when Daniel was a few weeks old. "I am 32 years old and I am done being pregnant." 3 is perfect," Xander agreed, kissing her temple. "Our family is perfect." But life had one more surprise. When Daniel was just over a year old, Keira discovered she was pregnant once more. This time she laughed when she told Xander. "4," she said. "You got your 4 after all, you impossible man." Their 4th child, a daughter they named Grace, was born in 1893 on a beautiful spring morning when the whole ranch was in bloom. She was the baby of the family, sweet-tempered and easy, and the older children doted on her. Xander stood on the porch one evening when Grace was 6 months old, watching Thomas, now 12, teaching Sarah to rope a fence post while Daniel, at 2, toddled around trying to imitate them. Inside, he could hear Keira singing softly to Grace, a lullaby his mother used to sing. The land stretched out before him, green and thriving, the water from the spring flowing steady through the channels they had built together. The house they had expanded twice was full of noise and life and laughter. The barns were full of healthy animals. The account books showed prosperity that would have seemed impossible that terrible summer of 1883 when he had watched his last steer die in the dust. Keira came out onto the porch, Grace sleeping on her shoulder. She slipped her free arm around his waist, and he pulled her close. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Everything," he said honestly. "How it all started. How far we have come. How that day you showed up with that map changed my entire life." "Changed both our lives," Keira said softly. "I came out here looking for independence, for something to prove I was more than just my father's daughter. I found so much more than that." "What did you find?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "Home," she said simply. "Love, purpose. A partner who sees me as an equal, not as a decoration. Children I never knew I wanted but cannot imagine living without. A life I am proud of." She looked up at him. "Everything I was searching for without even knowing it." Xander kissed her forehead, then her lips, soft and lingering. "I lost everything to the drought," he said, echoing words he had spoken years ago. "And then you appeared with water rights and said we could share this. You gave me back more than I had lost. You gave me a future." "We gave each other a future," Keira corrected. "Partners, remember." "Partners," he agreed. "Always." Thomas called out that he had successfully roped the post, and Sarah was demanding her turn, and Daniel was crying because he had fallen down. Grace stirred on Keira's shoulder, making small sleeping noises. The sun was setting over the western hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "Come on," Keira said, tugging his hand. "Our family needs us." "They do," Xander agreed, and followed her inside, into the warmth and noise and beautiful chaos of the life they had built together from dust and determination and love. The years continued to roll by with the same steady persistence as the water from their spring. The children grew like the grass after rain sometimes. It seemed to Xander that he would blink, and they would be an inch taller, their faces changing from childish roundness to the sharp features of young adults. Thomas became his father's shadow, learning every aspect of ranching with the intensity of someone who knew this would be his life. At 15, he could rope as well as any of the hands, and he had an eye for horseflesh that made Xander proud. But he also had his mother's head for business, keeping careful records of bloodlines and breeding results. Sarah, at 12, surprised them both by announcing she wanted to learn veterinary medicine. "Animals get sick just like people," she said stubbornly when Xander expressed doubt. "Someone needs to know how to help them properly, not just with old remedies that might or might not work." Keira supported her immediately. "If my daughter wants to be a veterinarian, she will be a veterinarian. The world is changing, Xander. Women can do more now than they could when we were young." So Sarah began studying under old Doc Wilson in town, who was progressive enough to take on a female apprentice and smart enough to recognize talent when he saw it. She would ride into Ordway 3 times a week for lessons, then come home and practice on their livestock, much to the animals' occasional dismay. Daniel, at 7, was the wildest of the children, always climbing things he should not climb, jumping off things that were too high, coming home with scraped knees and torn shirts. But he had a gift with frightened animals, a gentleness that could calm even the most skittish horse. Xander thought he might become a horse trainer someday if he survived his adventurous childhood. Grace, at 5, was the artist of the family. She drew everything: the ranch, the animals, her family, the mountains in the distance. Her pictures covered the walls of the house, charcoal and pencil sketches that showed real skill. Keira wondered if there might be a school for art somewhere someday, though that seemed like a worry for the distant future. In 1898, when Thomas was 17 and already courting the Johnson girl from the neighboring ranch, A man rode up to the house one hot July day. He was well dressed, with the look of someone from the city, and he introduced himself as Henry Walsh, a writer from Chicago. "I am doing a series of articles about successful ranches in the West," he explained over coffee in their parlor. "The Ramsey Owens Ranch has quite a reputation. I would love to interview you both, if you are willing." Xander and Keira exchanged glances. They were proud of what they had built, but they had never sought publicity. Still, there was something appealing about having their story told. "What do you want to know?" Keira asked. Over the next 3 days, Henry Walsh interviewed them extensively, asking about the drought, the spring, the partnership, how they had built the ranch together. He watched them work, took notes constantly, and photographed everything with his new Kodak camera. "Your story is remarkable," he said on the last evening. "A woman and a man, meeting as strangers and becoming partners in every sense, building something successful in a place where so many others failed. It is the kind of story people need to hear, proof that cooperation and hard work can overcome even the worst circumstances." The article ran in Harper's Weekly that fall, complete with photographs. It painted the Ramsey Owens Ranch as an example of Western ingenuity and partnership, and it made particular note of Keira's role as co-owner and business manager. The article ended with a quote from Xander that made Keira cry when she read it. "My wife did not just save my ranch," he had said. "She saved my life and gave me a future I never dreamed I could have. Everything we have built, we built together as equals. That is the only way to build anything that lasts." The article brought unexpected attention. Other ranchers wrote asking for advice. A few women wrote to Keira, asking how they could start their own operations. A university professor came all the way from Cornell to study their water management system. Through it all, Xander and Keira stayed focused on what mattered: their family, their land, their partnership. They had built something real and lasting, and no amount of attention would change that. Thomas married Hannah Johnson in the spring of 1899, and by Christmas, he had made Xander and Keira grandparents for the first time, a healthy baby boy they named Xander Thomas, though everyone called him Little Xander to avoid confusion. Thomas and Hannah built a house on the eastern portion of the ranch, and Thomas officially became the ranch foreman, working alongside his father. Sarah, at 16, was accepted into a veterinary program in Fort Collins, one of the first in Colorado to accept women. Keira cried with pride the day they took her to start school, though she missed her daughter terribly once she was gone. But Sarah came home for holidays and summers, full of stories about anatomy and surgery, and the latest scientific theories about animal health. Daniel, at 12, convinced his parents to let him start a horse training business on the ranch. "We breed good horses," he argued, "but we could breed great horses if we trained them properly from the start. I know I can do it." Xander was skeptical, but Keira saw the same determination in Daniel's eyes that she had seen in her own reflection years ago. "Let him try," she said. "We believed in each other when others did not. We can believe in our son." Daniel proved them right, developing training techniques that produced horses known throughout Colorado for their responsiveness and calm temperaments. By the time he was 15, ranchers were sending their horses to the Ramsey Owens Ranch specifically for Daniel to train. Grace, at 10, was still drawing constantly, but she had also developed an interest in writing. She kept a journal of ranch life, filling pages with descriptions and sketches. "I want to write a book someday," she announced at dinner one night. "About what it was really like, building a ranch and raising a family out here, so people remember." "You should," Keira encouraged. "Stories matter. They are how we understand our history, our lives. In 1902, they celebrated 20 years of marriage. The ranch now covered over 2,000 acres, supported 300 head of cattle, 50 sheep, and a renowned horse breeding operation. They employed 8 hands full-time, and twice that many during busy seasons. The house had been expanded and improved until it was genuinely grand, though they were careful to keep the original structure at its heart: the porch where Xander had sat that day Keira first arrived, the kitchen where they had shared so many late-night planning sessions, the bedroom where all 4 of their children had been born. For their anniversary, Xander took Keira back up to the spring, just the 2 of them. They rode the familiar path, though it was easier now with a proper trail and wooden bridges over the rough spots. The spring still bubbled clear and cold, the source of everything they had built. "Do you remember when we first came up here?" Keira asked, kneeling beside the water. "I was so nervous you would say my plan would not work." "I remember thinking you were either crazy or brilliant," Xander said, sitting beside her. "Turned out to be both." She laughed, that same clear laugh that still made his heart jump. "Look at us now. 20 years, 4 children, grandchildren starting already. Who would have believed it?" "I would have," Xander said. "From that very first day I believed in you, in us." "Liar," she said fondly. "You thought I was insane." "Maybe a little," he admitted. "But I also thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, and brave and smart, and everything I did not know I needed." Keira leaned against him, and they sat there in comfortable silence, listening to the water. "I love this place," she said finally. "Not just the ranch, but right here, this spring, where it all started." "Where we started," Xander corrected. "Yes," she said, "where we started." They sat there until the sun began to set, then rode back down to the ranch house, to their family and their life, hand in hand. The new century brought changes to the West. Automobiles started appearing on the roads, though they were still rare and unreliable. Electricity came to Ordway in 1905, and after some debate, Xander and Keira had lines run to the ranch house. Thomas was fascinated by the new technology, already talking about how motors might be used for ranch work. Sarah came home from her studies with stories about X-rays and other medical advances that sounded like something from a Jules Verne novel, but some things stayed the same. The land still required hard work and attention. The water still flowed from the spring, life-giving and constant. Families still gathered around tables for meals, still worked together through seasons and years, still built futures one day at a time. In 1908, when Xander was 52 and Keira was 48, they decided to step back from the day-to-day management of the ranch. Thomas was 32 now, fully capable of running the operation with his wife Hannah. Sarah had returned from Fort Collins with her veterinary degree and had set up a practice in Ordway, though she still came to the ranch regularly. Daniel, at 22, had married a girl from Pueblo and was expanding the horse training operation. Grace, at 18, had been accepted to a women's college in Denver, where she planned to study literature and writing. "We did it," Keira said one evening on the porch. They still spent most evenings there when weather permitted, watching the sun set over their land. "We raised them, educated them, gave them good lives." "You did that," Xander said. "You made sure they all had chances we never had." "We did that," Keira corrected. "Together." He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. They were older now, gray in their hair and lines in their faces, but he still thought she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. And when she looked at him, he still saw love in those creek water eyes. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Coming out here, taking that risk?" "Not once," Keira said immediately. "Not for a single moment, do you? Trusting me that first day, best decision I ever made," Xander said. "Besides marrying you." "That was the same decision, really," Keira pointed out. He laughed. I suppose it was. Little Xander came running around the corner of the house, now 9 years old and full of energy. He was followed by his younger siblings. Thomas and Hannah had ended up with 4 children of their own, continuing the family tradition. Behind them came Daniel's 2 children and the visiting children of ranch hands, a whole noisy pack of youngsters. "Grandpa," little Xander called out. "Tell us the story again about the drought and how Grandma saved the ranch," Xander groaned good-naturedly. "You have heard that story 100 times, but we like it," insisted Mary, Daniel's 6-year-old daughter. "Please," Keira smiled. "Go ahead, tell them." So Xander told the story again, as he had told it so many times before. He told them about the drought that killed everything, about the last steer dying in the dust, about being ready to give up. He told them about the wagon that appeared in the heat, about the beautiful woman with the map, about water rights and impossible partnerships. "And she said," little Xander chimed in, knowing his part, "we can share this." "That is right," Xander said. "She said we can share this, and we did. We shared the water and the work and the land. We built something together that neither of us could have built alone. And then you fell in love," Mary added dreamily. "Yes," Keira said softly, reaching for Xander's hand. "Then we fell in love." "And had babies," one of the younger children contributed. "4 of them," Xander confirmed. "And those babies grew up and had babies of their own, and that is how we got all of you." The children peppered them with questions, as they always did. What did the drought look like? How did you dig the pipes? Were you scared? Did you kiss right away? Xander and Keira answered patiently, remembering together, finishing each other's sentences the way they had learned to do over 25 years of marriage. Eventually, Hannah called the children in for supper, and they scattered, running toward the main house with the same energy they did everything. Xander and Keira stayed on the porch, watching the land fall into shadow. "You think they understand?" Keira asked. "What it really took?" "Not yet," Xander said, "but someday they will. When they face their own droughts, their own impossible situations, then they will remember that their grandparents survived, and they will know they can too." "I hope they never face what we faced," Keira said quietly. "They will face something," Xander said. "Everyone does. But we taught them to work hard, to be smart, to stick together. That is all we can do." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out, one by one, the same stars that had watched them dig ditches and build channels and create something from nothing. The same stars that had witnessed a desperate man and a determined woman making the choice to trust each other, to share the water, to build a future together. 25 years, Keira said. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like forever." "Both," Xander agreed. "It has been both." She turned to look at him, and even in the dim light he could see her smile. "I would do it all again. Every difficult moment, every worry, every risk, all of it to end up right here with you." "Me too," Xander said, and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of 25 years of partnership and love. The spring in the hills still flowed cold and clear, as it had since before humans walked these lands and would continue long after they were gone. But for now, for this moment and all the moments that had led here and all the moments still to come, it was their spring, their water, their life, built together from drought and desperation and the simple, radical choice to share. And as Xander and Keira sat together on the porch of the ranch, they had saved and built and loved, surrounded by family and prosperity and the sweet evening air of Colorado, they knew with absolute certainty that it had all been worth it. Every struggle, every sacrifice, every leap of faith. Because she had appeared when he lost everything, and she had said they could share this. And from that sharing had grown not just a ranch, but a love that would endure as long as the water flowed steady, constant, and life-giving.